You know, it's funny. 3D printing used to be something, well, straight out of Star Trek. Like, remember those replicators? Just
Yeah.
make anything. We're not quite there yet. But 3D printing really is changing how we make, well, everything. From jet engines to, I don't know, maybe someday pizza.
It's revolutionizing how we think about manufacturing for sure.
Okay, so in this deep dive, you've given us a ton of information about 3D printing, and we are going to try and take everyone listening from, let's just say, curious about 3D printing to really understanding the basics and the major players and how it's impacting different industries and what the future might hold.
That's right. We're gonna take a look at the technologies. We're also gonna make sure that you understand, why they matter. What are the strengths of the different technologies? So you can come away understanding not just the what, but the so what.
Okay, sounds good. Let's jump right in. You've shared information on a whole bunch of different 3D printing technologies,
Hmm.
from, well, FDM, which seems like the one that everyone knows, to things like DMLS, which sounds pretty intense.
It is. But let's start with FDM, or fused deposition modeling, since it's the most common one, the one you've probably seen, examples of. It works kind of like a hot glue gun, melting plastic and extruding it layer by layer to build up a three-dimensional object.
Okay, so that's the one you see, like in all those time-lapse videos online where they're like building little models, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a relatively inexpensive and easy way to use 3D printing, which is why it's so popular with hobbyists and also for prototyping designs. But when you need to step up to more demanding applications, you got to look at technologies like stereolithography or SLA.
And SLA is all about precision, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned in your notes that this is used in dentistry. Like, what's so special about SLA?
Well, instead of extruding plastic, SLA uses a laser to cure a liquid resin. So this gives you incredibly fine detail, smooth surface finishes, which is super important for things like dental crowns or molds for jewelry. You just couldn't get that level of detail with FDM.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so then there's SLS and DMLS, both of which use lasers, but for something a lot more heavy duty. What's the difference between SLS and DMLS?
You're right, they both use a laser to kind of fuse powders together, right? But in selective laser sintering, SLS, the powder is usually a nylon or some other polymer material. And it's great for creating strong functional prototypes, even some end-use parts. But when you need something even tougher, you turn to direct metal laser sintering, or DMLS.
Okay, so we're talking with DMLS, you're literally printing with metal.
That's right, you're using a high-powered laser to melt and fuse metal powders.
Yep.
And it lets you create parts that are both incredibly strong and lightweight. And this is really a game changer for industries like aerospace and medical, where performance is critical.
Okay, wow. All right, two down, a few more to go. You also shared some information on binder jetting and material jetting, which sound, I don't know, a little more obscure.
They are, but as 3D printing gets more sophisticated, they're becoming more and more important. So binder jetting, think about it like a giant inkjet printer. But instead of ink, it deposits a binding agent onto a powder bed. And this creates a solid part that can then be further processed. So it's a really good option for making things like molds for casting metal parts. And it's also being used for getting a lot of attention for its potential in creating full color objects.
Soul color 3D printing. Huh, that's pretty cool. And then there's material jetting, which sounds like it takes that concept even further.
Yeah, imagine a color inkjet printer, but instead of just different inks, each cartridge actually has a different material with specific properties. So you can have, say, a part that is flexible in one area and then rigid in another, all printed in one go. It's incredibly versatile and allows for really innovative
So
design.
you're saying it's not just about printing in different colors, it's about printing with different materials all in the same object. This is giving me all sorts of ideas.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? And I think the key thing to remember here is that no single 3D printing technology is the best. They're all good at certain things, not so good at others.
Okay, so now that we've sort of gotten a taste of these different technologies, where do we actually see them being used? I mean, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Like, how is this technology actually changing the world?
Well, one of the most, I guess you could say, immediate impacts has been in rapid prototyping. And that's basically just using a 3D printer to quickly create a physical model of a design.
Okay, so instead of spending weeks or months building a prototype by hand or even with, traditional manufacturing methods, you can just print it out in a matter of hours.
Yeah, exactly. It saves a ton of time, especially for companies that are trying to get new products to market very quickly. Also lets designers try out, different variations of a design, test them out in the real world before they commit to a final product.
It's like the print button for your ideas. You mentioned in your rates that this is having a big impact on industries like automotive and aerospace. Can you give me a real-world example?
Sure. Think about a company like Airbus, right? They're using 3D printing to create lightweight brackets and other components for their aircraft. And by being able to print these parts on demand, they can reduce waste, shorten lead times, and they can even customize parts for a specific aircraft.
Oh, that makes sense. Lightweight and high strength, pretty important when you're building an airplane.
Yeah.
And I imagine the medical industry must be, like, going crazy for this technology.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Think about custom fit hip replacements, dental implants, even surgical guides. With 3D printing, doctors can create implants that are perfectly tailored to a patient's anatomy, and that can lead to better outcomes and faster recovery times.
That's bespoke tailoring for medical devices.
Hmm.
But 3D printing isn't just about making things faster or cheaper, right? It's also about opening up a whole new world of possibilities in terms of customization and personalization.
Yeah, you're right. We're moving away from that kind of one-size-fits-all world to one where products are really designed and manufactured specifically for you. So imagine shoes that perfectly fit your feet, hearing aids that match your ear canal, or even prosthetic limbs that are tailored to your exact needs.
I mean, that sounds pretty amazing, especially for, people with unique needs or medical conditions.
Yeah.
No more having to settle for something that's close enough. But wait, hold on a second. If we can, just print whatever we want on demand, doesn't that mean that everyone's going to have like their own mini factory at home? I mean, what happens to traditional manufacturing?
It's a good question. And it really gets to the heart of how 3D printing might change the world. Some experts believe that it will lead to a more distributed model of manufacturing, one where production is much more localized and it's on demand.
Okay, so instead of having like giant factories churning out, mass-produced goods, we'll have smaller, more agile facilities that can produce goods closer to the customer.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine being able to print a replacement part for your washing machine, say, at your local hardware store, instead of waiting weeks for it to be shipped from a factory across the world.
I mean, that sounds super convenient.
Yeah.
And I imagine it would be a huge boost for local economies and really reduce our reliance on these long, complex supply chains. But before we get too carried away with like this futuristic vision, I guess we should probably talk about some of the challenges that 3D printing still faces.
Yeah, you're right. It's not a magic solution to all of our manufacturing problems. One of the biggest challenges is cost. While the price of 3D printers themselves has come down a lot, it can still be pretty expensive to produce some things in large quantities, especially compared to traditional methods.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a barrier for mass adoption, especially for companies that need to produce, millions of units of a product.
Yeah.
What else is holding 3D printing back?
Speed is another big one. Some 3D printing technologies are getting faster, but they're still generally slower than traditional manufacturing techniques, especially for high volume production. And then, of course, there's the issue of materials. The range of materials that you can actually 3D print is still pretty limited compared to, what's available with traditional manufacturing.
Right. So while we can print some, I don't know, pretty amazing things, we're still kind of constrained by what materials we can actually use.
Exactly. And, while we are getting better at creating larger 3D printed objects, there are still limitations on size depending on which technology you're using. So you're not going to be printing a full-size car anytime soon.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But those all sound like challenges that they could be overcome, I guess, with further development and innovation, right?
Hmm.
What I'm really curious about is, where does this technology go from here? Like, what does the future of 3D printing actually look like?
Well, that's where things get really exciting. We were talking about the future, and I gotta say, the possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
Well, I'm ready to be blown away. Give me some glimpses into this 3D printed future.
Okay, well, one area where we're seeing some incredible progress is in material development. Right now, we're still kind of limited in terms of what we can actually print with, but scientists are working on creating all sorts of new and amazing materials that are specifically designed for 3D printing.
So instead of just being able to print with like, plastics and metals, we might be able to print with things like ceramics, wood, even, I don't know, fabrics.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine like printing clothes that are perfectly tailored to your body or furniture that's, both strong and lightweight. We're also seeing the development of materials with these really unique properties like self-healing materials that can actually repair themselves if they get damaged.
Self-healing materials. That sounds like something straight out of, a superhero movie. How does that even work?
It's really wild, right? What they do is Researchers are embedding these tiny capsules filled with a healing agent into the material itself. So then, when the material cracks or gets damaged, these capsules release the healing agent, which then reacts and seals the crack.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like giving objects a built-in immune system. What other crazy materials are on the horizon?
Well, there's a lot of buzz these days about 4D printing, and this is taking 3D printing to a whole new level.
4D printing. Okay, now I'm really confused. How do you add another dimension to printing?
Well, it's not about adding a spatial dimension. It's really about adding the dimension of time. So with 4D printing, you're creating objects that can change shape or even their properties over time, usually in response to some external stimuli, like temperature or light.
Wait, so you're telling me we could like print objects that can like transform themselves? I mean, what would be the use of that?
Well, I mean, the possibilities are kind of endless. Imagine medical implants that adjust to the body as it heals, or self-assembling furniture that you kind of just unfold and it takes shape on its own. Or how about clothes that change color depending on the temperature?
Okay, that's pretty wild. So we've got new materials, we've got shape-shifting objects. What else is in store for the future of 3D printing?
Well, one area that's generating a lot of excitement and honestly a little bit of concern too is bioprinting.
Oh, yes. Bioprinting. I think you mentioned this earlier, right? It's the idea of like using 3D printing to create living tissues and organs.
Yeah, that's right. And it's still early days, but scientists have actually made some really significant progress in printing things like skin grafts, cartilage, even simple organs like bladders.
That's incredible, but are we really talking about like printing fully functional organs that can like be transplanted into humans?
I mean, that's the ultimate goal, but it's still a long way off. I mean, there are huge technical and ethical challenges that we have to overcome first. But imagine a world where we can print custom organs for transplant patients, eliminating the need for organ donors and saving countless lives.
Yeah, I mean it sounds like something out of science fiction.
Yeah.
But, it could become a reality in our lifetime. Really makes you wonder what other kind of medical breakthroughs 3D printing could enable.
Well, beyond, actually printing organs, 3D printing is already having a huge impact on what we call personalized medicine. So think about, custom designed prosthetics, implants that are perfectly tailored to a patient's anatomy, even surgical tools that are created specifically for a particular procedure.
You mentioned custom prosthetics earlier. I was reading an article just the other day about a company that's 3D printing prosthetic limbs for children that look like superhero arms.
Hmm.
It's amazing how this technology is not just, I mean, improving functionality, but it's also bringing like a touch of creativity and fun to something that could, otherwise be pretty traumatic.
Yeah, it's really heartwarming to see that. And it's not just prosthetics either. 3D printing is also being used to create anatomical models that surgeons can actually use to plan and practice complex surgery. So it allows them to, visualize the procedure beforehand, identify any potential problems, even rehearse their approach, which of course leads to better outcomes for
It's
patients.
like having a dress rehearsal for surgery. I mean, that's got to be a huge confidence booster for both the surgeon and the patient.
Oh, absolutely. And let's not forget about the impact that 3D printing is having on drug development. Researchers are now using 3D printing to create these personalized drug delivery systems where a medication is released in a controlled manner that's tailored to the patient's needs.
Oh, so instead of, taking a pill every day, you could have like a 3D printed implant that releases the medication gradually over time.
Exactly. And this could be a real game changer for people with chronic conditions, making it much easier to manage their medications and improving treatment outcomes.
Okay, so we've talked about new materials, we've got shape-shifting objects, bioprinting, personalized medicine. I mean, is there anything 3D printing can't do?
Well, it's not a magic wand. There are still some pretty big challenges that need to be overcome, especially when it comes to things like scalability and making it cost effective for mass production. And as we talked about earlier, the range of materials that we can actually print with is still pretty limited. But maybe the biggest challenge isn't really technological, but rather societal.
What do you mean by that?
Well, as 3D printing becomes more widespread, more accessible, it's going to disrupt existing industries and create, all sorts of new possibilities, right? So we need to think very carefully about the ethical implications of this technology, how it might affect jobs and the economy,
Yeah.
and how we can make sure that it's actually used responsibly.
It's like any powerful technology, right?
Mhm.
It can be used for good or for bad, and we need to make sure that we're using it to create a better future, not just a more convenient one.
I couldn't agree more, but I think despite the challenges, the potential of 3D printing is undeniable, right? It's already transforming industries. It's empowering individuals. It's changing the way that we think about manufacturing and design. And as the technology continues to evolve, the possibilities really are limitless.
Okay, so we've explored this amazing world of 3D printing, kind of from its humble beginnings to its pretty mind-blowing potential, I guess.
Yeah.
Now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about how this technology is impacting some specific industries. Let's start with manufacturing. You've given me a bunch of articles about how 3D printing is changing the factory floor, but honestly, it all sounds a little bit futuristic to me.
Well, get ready to step into the factory of the future because 3D printing is already having a major impact on how things are made.
So we're not just talking about like prototypes anymore. 3D printing
Yeah.
is actually being used to manufacture like real products, like on a larger scale.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We talked about rapid prototyping and that's a huge benefit, but 3D printing is moving beyond just design and testing. We're seeing it used now for actual production,
Hmm.
especially for parts that are, really complex or need to be customized or maybe they're just needed in smaller quantities.
So what kind of products are we talking about? Give me some real world examples.
Sure. Think about the aerospace industry. They're using 3D printing now to create everything from fuel nozzles to really intricate brackets for aircraft interiors. And these parts they're often very specialized. They need to be incredibly lightweight and strong. And 3D printing lets them create these parts with less material waste,
Hmm.
sometimes in ways that would just be impossible with traditional manufacturing methods.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lightweight and high strength. I mean, pretty important when you're building an airplane. What other industries are really embracing 3D printing for production?
The automotive industry is another big one. They're using it to create custom parts for prototypes, even for limited edition vehicles. But it's not just about the big flashy things. Think about spare parts, right? Instead of having to keep a huge inventory of parts on hand, companies can 3D print parts on demand as needed, reduces storage costs, reduces waste.
Well, that's a great point. And I imagine that would be especially useful for older products where, it might be like really difficult or expensive to source replacement parts. No more scouring eBay for that, one
Right.
obscure component you need to fix your vintage record player or something.
Exactly. It's like having a digital library of parts that you can just access and print whenever you need them. This could
Yeah.
be a game changer for industries like consumer electronics, where products have relatively short lifespans and sourcing parts can be a real nightmare.
So 3D printing is really making manufacturing, I don't know, more efficient, more flexible, and maybe more responsive to customer needs, right? But what about the workers? I mean, are robots gonna like take over the factory floor? Are humans gonna be out of a job?
Yeah, it's a common concern, but it's not necessarily the case. 3D printing will probably automate some tasks, sure, but it's also creating new jobs in areas like design, engineering, material science.
So it's not just about replacing jobs. It's also about creating new opportunities and requiring different skill sets.
Exactly. And it's also important to remember that, 3D printing isn't really meant to replace traditional manufacturing completely. It's more about finding the right tool for the job. Some things are still best made with traditional methods while others are perfectly suited for 3D printing.
It's all about finding the right balance, I guess. But I mean, as 3D printing gets more sophisticated, as it becomes more affordable, I imagine it will continue to disrupt these traditional manufacturing models, right? And kind of force companies to adapt.
Oh, absolutely. And this disruption, I think, could lead to to a more localized and decentralized approach to manufacturing, where you see smaller, more agile factories popping up closer to customers.
So instead of having, just a few giant factories producing, like everything, we might see like a network of smaller, more specialized facilities kind of spread out across the globe.
Yeah, exactly. And
Right.
this would have all sorts of implications for, for supply chains, for logistics, even for the environmental impact of manufacturing. Imagine being able to produce goods locally, reducing transportation costs and emissions.
Yeah, it's a compelling vision and one that that seems increasingly within reach as 3D printing technology continues to advance. But I guess we shouldn't forget that with any new technology comes new challenges and new responsibilities.
Oh, you're absolutely right. As 3D printing becomes, more powerful, more accessible, we really do need to think carefully about the ethical implications. For
Hmm.
example, how do we prevent this technology from being used to create counterfeit goods or even dangerous weapons?
Yeah, it's like any powerful tool, right? It can be used for good or for evil, and we need to make sure that we have the right safeguards in place to make sure that it's used responsibly.
Exactly. We need to have, these open and honest conversations about the potential risks as well as the benefits of this technology. And we need to develop, regulations and guidelines that really ensure its safe and ethical use.
It's a tall order, but it's crucial that we get this right. I mean, the future of 3D printing is bright, but it's up to us to shape that future in a way that benefits all of humanity.
Well said. And I think this deep dive has given you a really solid foundation for understanding the complexities of 3D printing, the potential benefits, and really the challenges that we need to address as this technology continues to evolve.
I definitely feel like I've gone from 3D printing novice to, well, maybe not an expert, but at least someone who can hold their own in a conversation about it. What I find, I guess, most exciting is that we're really just scratching the surface of what's possible with 3D printing.
Exactly. I mean, what we've talked about today might seem like science fiction to some people,
Yeah.
but it's quickly becoming reality. And as the technology continues to advance, who knows what amazing things we'll be able to create.
So for those of you listening out there, here's something to ponder as you continue your own exploration of 3D printing. How how do you think this technology will impact your life in the years to come? Will you be designing and printing your own products? Will you be working in a 3D printing factory?
Yeah.
Or maybe you'll be benefiting from the medical breakthroughs that this technology is enabling.
It's a fascinating time to be alive, and 3D printing is definitely one of the most exciting and transformative technologies shaping our future.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of 3D printing. It's been an incredible journey, and we can't wait to see what the future holds for this amazing technology.